You now have Express serving up the contents of the public directory. In this video, I want to take a break from adding anything new to the Node.js application, and I want to focus on how we could continue to build out the public folder, adding our other assets into the mix and using them in our HTML files. So things like CSS style sheets to style the application, client-side JavaScript to add some dynamic user interaction, and images to show on the screen. Now let's go ahead and kick things off with the CSS we're going to add. If you're not familiar with CSS, that's okay. We're only going to use a little bit of CSS in this class, and the CSS we do use, I'll walk you through. So let's go ahead and kick this process off. Now, the file that we're going to create needs to be loaded by the browser, which means it needs to go in the public folder, as this is the only directory set up to be exposed by the web server. So we can put our CSS file in the public folder, and I'm actually going to stay organized and create a subdirectory called CSS for all of my style sheets, though for the moment we'll only have one. Inside of here, we can create our brand new style sheet. I'm going to call this styles.css. For now, we have very simple web pages where we just render a title for each page. Since we only have one thing showing up, we should probably add a style to that so we can actually see if our style sheet is loading correctly. All we're going to do is change the color of the title we're seeing. To start, we define which elements we're trying to style. In this case, it's just our H1s. So I'm going to type out H1 followed by an opening and closing curly brace. In here, we define all of the style properties we want to apply to those headers. And for the moment, we're just going to apply one, which is going to be color. Color allows you to set the text color. Right here after the colon, I'm going to type out gray, followed by a semicolon, and there we go. We have a completely valid style sheet. Now, just because we have it created in the public folder doesn't mean it's actually going to be used. If I were to head over to localhost 3000, the root of the site, we're going to see that it's not visible here, and it's not visible on any of our other pages as well. The title still shows up in black as opposed to gray. That's because we haven't loaded it in our HTML files, so let's go ahead and do that, starting with index.html. Right here, I'm going to go ahead and set up a new element inside of head. This is link. Right here, less than, link, greater than, and link is an empty element, which means it actually does not have a closing tag like we see with H1 and its closing tag here, or body and its closing tag down below. Link sits just like this. Now we set up on link two attributes. These are key value pairs, allowing us to define specific values. Link, to set up a style sheet, expects those two to be set. Right here, the first is rel, which is short for relationship. What exactly are we linking in? In this case, style sheet is the value we have to apply. Then href. This is the path to the file we're trying to load. Now, it's important to note that this path is relative to our current location, and its absolute start is the public directory. What do I mean by that? Well, // is obviously going to leave us in this public directory where index.html lives. From there, we could use CSS / styles.css, and that would indeed work. This is a relative path. So if I go ahead and refresh things, I can see that now my title is gray, which is great. Now that's the relative path version. We can also use an absolute path. The absolute path starts with a /. Now typically if you started a path with a / on your machine, that would bring you to the root of the hard drive. But this is being accessed in the browser, and thank God it doesn't have access to your hard drive. Otherwise, anyone could put up a website that reads files you wouldn't want them to read. This is relative to the web server root, which we set up as the public folder. So that would be / CSS / styles.css, and this is the URL we're going to end up using. Now, if we were to save things and refresh things in the browser, we can see that once again, we do still indeed have the gray style showing up. So we created a styles sheet in the public folder, we loaded it in, and we were able to style our application. From here, we could add other style sheets, and we could add more content to these style sheets to create a complex dynamic website. Now from here, we could take the link element, we can copy it over to our other files to make sure the style sheet loads there as well. I'm going to paste it into both HTML files, and I'll go ahead and save things as well. So that's loading in the style sheet. I also want to show you how you could load in a client-side JavaScript file. To get that done, once again, we're going to have to add a new file to the public folder, and this is going to be a JS file. Like we did with our style sheets, I'm going to create a new folder in the public directory called JS, and in the JS directory, we can just make a single style. We can call this one something like app.js, and this is a JavaScript file, which we'll actually fill out a bit later to do something meaningful. For the moment, we're just going to do something not meaningful and print a message to the screen so we can at least see if it's loading up. Right here, client-side JavaScript file is loaded. Perfect. So go ahead and print some message in your JavaScript file. We can then go ahead and actually close that down as we're not going to make any changes to it for a few lessons. And from here, we're going to make sure that it gets loaded in to index.html. We're actually not going to load it into the other pages, and you'll learn why a bit later. So right here, how do we get that done? To do that, we use a script tag in the head. Now, script is not an empty element, which means we do set up an opening and closing tag, which you can see that Visual Studio Code automatically completed for me. And then we provide the path to the file, much like we did in the href attribute, though we do it with the script tag via the source attribute. So source equals right here, that would be /js/app.js. Perfect. Now that we have this in place, we can make sure that our message shows up when we run the HTML file. Now, it's not going to show up on the browser's page, but it will show up in the developer tools. We can open those by going to the settings menu, more tools, developer tools, and once we're here, we're going to see something pretty similar, though a little more complex than what we had when we debugged Node.js. We're just looking for this console tab where we can view things that were outputted to the console. And right here, I have my message. Client-side JavaScript file is loaded. So we have a CSS file. We have a JavaScript file. Let's go ahead and wrap things up by adding an image into the mix, as that's one of the last common assets you would definitely end up using if you were building pretty much any kind of website out there. This means we are going to need an image we can load into one of our HTML files. We're going to get a profile picture of ourselves and put that on the About page, so it shows up under some description about what the website is all about. Now, if you have a picture of yourself, you can go ahead and bring that into the public directory. I'm going to use a picture of myself at links.mead.io/pic1. Now, obviously, you probably don't want to use a picture of me, but if you don't have a picture of yourself handy, you can always use what I have at links.mead.io/pic2. This is a picture of a robot, and you can use that for your application. So either image would work just fine, or an image you have on your machine. I'm going to go ahead and grab the picture of myself, and once I have that downloaded, I'm going to make sure it gets into the right directory. So I'm going to open up my Finder or the File Explorer on Windows. I'm going to navigate to the Downloads area and find my picture. From there, we have to get it into the desktop file. So I have to copy it to the clipboard. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, but you can always use the right-click copy image. Then I'm going to go to Desktop, followed by that into the Node course directory where we have Web Server. Then we go into the public folder, and right here, we don't have a place for images. We could just stick it right here alongside of our HTML file, but we could also create a new folder for those. Right here, IMG. Inside of there, I'll paste in that file I copied before. So now that we have the image in the images directory in the public folder, it's going to be accessible to anyone who has an internet connection. I can see it showing up right here, and we can actually load it into our page. To do that, right below the H1, we are going to set up an image element. This is also an empty element, so there is no closing tag, and we specify the path to the image using the source attribute like we did with the script. So /image/me.png is going to get the job done. Now, if we save things, we can pull up the About page and make sure it's actually showing up. over in the browser. I'm going to go to /about.html, and what do I see? I see the title with the picture of me down below. If I were to head over to the other pages, I would not see this picture as it's only listed here. Now we could always go ahead and target this img element if we wanted to. Over in the styles file, let's go ahead and add a couple of new lines, and we're going to set up another set of styles. This time I'm going to target my image elements. We just have one. I'm going to set up the curly braces, and we're going to make the image a bit smaller than it currently is. I'm going to say that I want the image to be 250 pixels wide. So width equals, so right after width, we have the colon, space, then 250px for pixels, followed by the semicolon, and we're done. Now we can go ahead and refresh the page, and we can see our image shows up at a more reasonable size. Now that we have this in place, we've taken a little tour of all of the different assets we can include in our web server as we're building out our websites. That's where we're going to stop for this little tour of the front end. We have HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and images all being loaded in with our server. In the next video, we're going to turn our attention back towards Node.js, and we're going to continue to build out and expand on our application. I'm excited to get to it, so stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.